Okay, welcome everybody. This is Scott Killaby. This is actually a special thing for me, and I don't even know if my participants know this because I've been waiting in the wings for a few years to talk to people who have been doing KI in a very skillful, consistent way and what happens for them over a period of time. You hear me sharing about it on podcast or YouTube, the things that people experience here and how it connects to non-dual realization. I'll talk about how stories come from buried emotions, shadows come from buried emotions, contraction, chronic pain. A lot of different things that we experience all come from the same source. These people are all people who discovered that in their direct experience over the course of years. So I have with me today, I've got Serena Senteshi, who is a certified mentor uh, and she's on our site. So if you want to work with Serena, you can go to killaby.com and see her there. I've got Toshi Matsunaga. He's a trainer and a certified mentor also. So Toshi can train people to become mentors, and he also mentors people. He's on our site. I've got Natalia Giedrys, and she's a certified mentor, just recently certified. Congratulations, Natalia, a couple months ago, actually. And she's here to share with us her experience. Jen Foxley, also someone that I personally trained, along with several of them, who's here. She's a certified mentor also. The thing that everybody has in common is that they also have a background in non-dual realization or practice, teachings, Eastern practice. So I specifically pulled together these folks to tell us or to share with you guys, what would one expect if you are on a non-dual or an awakening path and you come to KI? Or why would you come to KI? And what would KI reveal that maybe your path or practice doesn't reveal already? So you guys have been listening to me gab about that for several years. And now that these folks have had time to marinate with this work and deepen in it, they're going to share with you today their experience. And I'm just going to ask them questions so we can all learn about their experience. But it has to do with non-duality and how that experience is sitting with them now after years of doing repression inquiry. So let me start with a really easy question that they can all answer. I'll start with you, Toshi. Toshi and I talk about this stuff all the time. What was going on in your life that just led you to be interested in spiritual awakening or non-duality, if you can remember?
But back then, I was just curious. I've always been curious of what's really going on here, what's God and all this stuff. I grew up in Japan. There was culturally, we kind of questioned these kind of things and the nature of things. So back then, I was just wanted to know more, curious, like why I think about these things and why am I here? Who am I? And all those questions really. So that's the easy answer. But yeah, but you want me to go into why, but now I've done the work, I can see much deeper programs or mechanism that was working that I had to be working or things like that. But I'll just say that for now. Yeah.
We'll get there. Yeah, thank you, Toshi. Well, I just want to ask everybody the same question so you guys can understand the background of everyone, and then you can understand the trajectory of what they've gone through here. So, Serena, can I ask you the same question? Like, I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but what got you interested way back when in awakening rather than therapy or other things you were doing?
So I got interested in awakening very naturally because I was trying to find a way out of suffering because of my childhood. I went through a lot of tension, anxiety, and abuse. So I had a very difficult background as a child, and it created a lot of symptoms in my body, in my mind, and I was just suffering in general. I was also identified with it. And when I moved out of the house of my parents, I started to have like these awakening experiences spontaneously, kind of like felt more relaxed in the body. Everything started to feel lighter. And I got interested in what was happening because I had no spiritual background. So that's when I met the teachings of Eckhart Tolle. Someone just gave me an audiobook with the power of now. And that's how it started, basically. I was interested in this lighter experience beyond my suffering. I guess that's how it started, with not much understanding back then, of course.
Thank you. That's what I want to know is what it was like for us way back when we first, so we can see the progression in our lives. So Jen, can you answer the same question? If you remember what drew you to awakening non-duality?
Yeah, it was I was around 20 and I had an eating disorder, and I grew up in a fairly traumatic family. There was a lot of chaos and confusion, and I certainly didn't feel very nurtured growing up. So I found Hatha yoga and I found Zen meditation. And for me, those were nurturing practices that gave me a sense of nervous system regulation, is what I found. Now I understand that. So I was able to feel more grounded and more in my body for the first time in my life. But at the same time, now I realize I had to keep coming back to those practices. It was a way for me to manage my life. And it wasn't until I found KI that I realized that I had been managing my life and my suffering my entire life through these practices like Hatha yoga and Zen meditation, Vipassana meditation, those kinds of practices. So that's how I started with my non-dual practice.
Thank you, Jen, because I want to come back to that, how you say you were regulating your system. I'll bring that question back in a second. But Natalia, same question, how you got started with spirituality awakening?
Yeah, hi. So since I remember, I was just running away from myself, basically. I was looking for something else, whatever that was, just something else outside, like somewhere far away. And I was just looking everywhere, like in art, in literature, in like all kinds of ways that I just couldn't stand being here, basically. I just wanted to run away. So I mean, first I think it was like I found Buddhism, and I was practicing really, really hard for quite a short period of time, and really intensively. Then I realized that there is a God or something like this. During like Buddhist meditation, that where a teacher was telling me that there is no God, during this practice I just realized that, oh my God, it's like completely something else. And I went this way, and then, but I simultaneously I was also running away using drinking alcohol. So I was just, but then when I stopped drinking, oh, no, it was actually, I was already drinking. I found somehow, I don't remember how exactly, I found non-dual teachings, also Eckhart Tolle, and I mean actually just this stopping and realizing that I can just stop inwardly. That was just a huge thing for me. And then I found other teachers, like my main two teachers, and I just felt like 100% for this. If this is answering your question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So now the next question has nothing to do with KI yet, but it has more to do with once you were on the path of awakening or non-duality or with teachers, what were the benefits? Jen talked about that. It's like she talked about nervous system regulation. There are also other benefits, but also then what are the limitations? What was it that you couldn't get to before you get to the KI? What was it about? Because that's what I think people who are living that, they don't see it. It's hard to see that because they're right in the middle of it. So you guys have this opportunity to help them by sharing your experience, the things that you were seeing before you even knew there was a KI. What were you seeing in your own life and practice in terms of limitation? So Toshi, I'll just start with you again, since I started like last time with you. The benefits and the limitations of before you got here to awakening, practice, teaching.
Yeah, so I mean, I went through many, from Course in Miracles to Buddhism to Zen stuff to non-duality, hardcore non-duality, Advaita stuff to neo-Advaita, all those stuff I went through. I went through the whole thing. And I had what you call, I don't know, awakening experiences or glimpses, to nature of things and stuff like that. And I had my honeymoon period where I guess, Jen might call it now, but, I managed to regulate my system better and stuff like that. But then my suffering continued, or it kind of got worse really after the honeymoon period or whatever that was, whatever I saw. And I will never deny the fact, I never deny those experiences, but it felt like suffering had its own, or like the condition just I was there almost separately from what I experienced, that just carried on, and I just couldn't connect to it, because it's so easy to just say there's nobody here or any of the teaching that points to, and it's just that came really soothing. But I started to experience the limit of that. The suffering got worse. The more I went there, the suffering got worse, and that's when I really had to change up, and I couldn't really listen to those teachers anymore because my suffering was too much for me. So that was my kind of limitation, the suffering for me. So the suffering continued, or it got worse for me. So yeah.
Well, there came a time then, Toshi, real quick, where you stopped listening to the teachings because the suffering was still coming up even after you had some degree of presence in your experience.
I think, I just couldn't. It just felt like there was something missing. They could, teachers wasn't seeing themselves, and I could only listen to like people who starts to talk about the bodies now, and that's how I got to know you, because everything, the suffering, when I really meditate with it and just allowing things, everything's contracting, and the suffering is, it feels like contraction. I really got to know, but I couldn't access it. I knew it was kind of something down there that I just couldn't access it. There was something down there that just wasn't accessing. It got really frustrating because they would just tell you to sit with it. Or some of my teachers would just, I sat with it for hours, months. But then I could feel this thing that I didn't have access to until I met you and some other kind of teachers who included somatic work, basically, to actually getting down to the body. So that was the suffering, that not knowing what's going on, if I think about it, that how unconscious I am with the thing. So yeah.
Thank you. So I might go in a different order here, but I'll just come up with Jen's coming out for some reason. Because you said a little bit about already what the kinds of practices and teachings you were involved in. So maybe you can say more about that and the benefits and limitations.
Well, in hindsight, I was living in just a horrible, like I was going to these practices consistently while the outside of my life, I was in a horrible relationship. Everything around me felt super toxic, and I was finding shelter in these practices. So I kept going to yoga and meditation to regulate myself over and over again. But like Toshi was speaking to, I felt like these contractions in my body, fear, these other emotions, that these practices, I mean, I liked hatha yoga because it brought me out of my head, because I can tend to be in my head too much. And so I liked yoga for the fact that it brought me out of my head into my body, but still it didn't get to these deeper sensations that Toshi was speaking to. And I wasn't even aware of them, like the contractions and the fear and the other emotions, until I went to therapy. And it was in therapy that I realized, like, I have these emotions and these stuck energies in my body that I'm unable to access. But even there, I know we're not talking about therapy, but even therapy wasn't able to get to those. So in hindsight, I'm like, I think I stayed in these like toxic relationships and situations most of my life, kind of like self-sabotaged. And I was able to stay in them for so long because I had these other tools like hatha yoga and meditation to kind of regulate my nervous system in these situations. Had I not had those, I don't know what would have happened. Maybe I would be in a mental institution. I'm not sure.
That's a good point. Okay, we'll come back to that maybe. Natalia, what do you want to add to this, your experience with the teachings and practices and the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Yeah, I want to start with the good things, because actually, like during I think my second satsang, there was just really this really important shift happened for me. And then I remember I just went back to, I was studying at Fine Arts Academy, and I went back to school, and I was standing in the corridor, and I looked at my friend. She was always triggering me so hard, and I looked at her, and I remember this first time in my life, like I was aware of my thoughts and emotions somehow, that it wasn't glued like fully, but there was just some more space, and it was really like unbelievably new for me. So it was amazing, actually. It gave me a lot. But then since then, so I was just trying so hard. I was just like really trying so hard. I was really deeply devoted to satsang. Like 100%, like I just put everything on this altar, including my hair, like everything, like really for like 8 years. And so so I was trying so hard to stay there somewhere, like stay there, out of my experience. Basically, I wanted to just run away from the experience. So the more something in me was trying to, like, screaming for attention, the more I was just like no, just everywhere, just out of here, just totally out of here. So I was just so disconnected, but I wasn't aware of, like, I was trying to remind myself how exactly, what was my experience back then in these years. But actually, since KI, my perception changed so much that it's so difficult for me to access this. I don't remember how I was feeling exactly, but I was putting so many, I mean, I was meditating, like sitting in silence for hours a day, every day, for many years, like for these 8 years. Yeah, and that was a suffering.
Thank you. And Serena, can you give us your experience now?
So Advaita and non-dual awareness and the recognition of this, it really helped me to recognize this felt sense of presence in the body. And that was something that I was deeply missing, because I was always dissociating as a child because of the difficult environment. So having that experience that I'm in the body and I can be present with thoughts and feelings, that was already like a very good and necessary and important step for me, I think, on my journey. And also that I felt more connected with people through the recognition that actually everything is connected. And I could also feel like this self-love in my body. Because, so basically, the spiritual recognition and the meditation practice gave me what I couldn't experience as a child with my parents. I don't know if it has to do with the unmet needs from childhood. And it was very, very useful because I became very grounded in this presence or awareness, and I could observe the experience, and it gave me some stability and groundedness, basically. But after 12 years of dwelling in awareness and in meditation and in non-dual inquiry, kind of observing thoughts and feelings from a distance, my teachers asked, why are you coming to Satsang still? Why are you still practicing awareness meditation and stuff like this? Because there is no deeper recognition of awareness. And I was shocked by that, because although it was very useful for a while and I needed that recognition because of my traumas, I was deeply suffering on a human level, meaning that I had like severe anxiety. I couldn't be close to people. Sometimes I was in psychosis because the recognition itself wanted to brought up the trauma, but I couldn't deal with it. I had strong, severe financial issues. I was in a harmful relationship. So I had all the problems that a human can have in the human realm, and I didn't know what to do with that. So when my teachers told to me, like, you are not supposed to come to satsang anymore because you realize awareness, I didn't know what to do. So that's when I started to see that something was missing and that I needed something else to integrate my pain, something like this.
Thank you. Okay. So before we go into this next question, I actually want to ask everyone to let the audience know what emotions that you had buried this whole time that you discovered here when you got to KI, so that they can hear that, because they've now heard your history. And Serena alluded to something's missing. Jen alluded to regulating her nervous system, using spiritual practices for that. Toshi mentioned that the suffering was so bad that he had to stop listening to the teachings. So there's something that's being missed. And we don't want to go into this conversation too vaguely because KI does get specific about what we missed. So can you tell us each, before I ask the next question, what are the emotions? I know that's a big set of things, traits and emotions that we hold down, and we could talk about that all day, but what are the dominant emotions that you repressed that you discovered here in KI? People know that mine was anger and some other things. Serena, can you answer that?
Yes. So just to give a little bit of background, how I started to bypass my anger, basically my anger and power with spirituality. I just want to make it clear for those who listen, that it didn't start with spirituality and with awakening and these experiences. It started back then when I was a little child, that actually seeking spirituality and bypassing with it, it was just coming from a trauma response and an emotional shutdown mechanism that I had been carrying since childhood. And just a little bit of details. When I was a child, I grew up in abuse. It meant like daily threat, basically. So I could barely feel any emotion in the body because I couldn't deal with it because there was a lot of fear. So when something happened when I was a child, something traumatic, someone hurt me, whatever, my usual response was I got frozen, and I got emotionally shut down. And after it happened, I literally forgot what happened because it was domestic abuse. So I had to live with those people. So that's how my system protected me, emotional shutdown and forgetting what happened. And it means literally, my brother or my mother hurt me, and then I walked out of the room and I forgot that. So that was running in my mind and psyche constantly for 3 decades, like just forget it, everything is fine, everything is okay, just forget it. And because of the fear and the shutdown was so strong in my system, I couldn't feel any anger about what was happening because the fear-driven message that told to me to forget what was happening, it made me to forget my anger also. So there was no space for my anger and power to come up. That's why this is my dominant repression, because it couldn't come up at all. I couldn't experience it as a child. And so what comes to my mind is that when I met you for the first time and we had our first meeting, and I was saying to you, I was sharing my symptoms with you, like colitis, anxiety, a lot of pain in the belly, etc., anxiety. And you said, after listening to my symptoms, you said like, oh, maybe you also repress anger like me. And I was like, it didn't land anywhere, I felt empty, like I could hear the words, but I couldn't link it to anywhere in my body mind, And I remember that I was saying like, no, I'm never angry. I'm not that type of angry person. And your smile was reflecting something that gave me some understanding. Like I could just hear myself saying that, like, oh, I'm never angry. So it might be, maybe it's repressed, because I never feel anger. So that's when it dawned on me for the first time. And it gave me a clue that, oh, wow, okay. So if it's that repressed that I can't even feel anger for over 3 decades, then maybe that's creating the colitis, the severe anxiety, and the other issues that I had. So yeah, I'm just saying to people that it can be that repressed that yeah, I also built my personality and my behavior unconsciously around it, And when I started KI with you, I remember like realizing how identified I was with that deficiency feeling of I'm small, unlovable, I'm not good enough, and I will never deserve to be loved. Kind of like that's the main story of my identity. And I could see that I lived my life in that identification with this feeling basically that was coming from my childhood, because that was the experience in the relationship with my mom and dad. And I started to see that within this identity, how repressed the anger is or was because of the fear of expressing that anger and experiencing abuse again. So basically, I'm just saying because it's not complicated. I just felt deficient about myself. I didn't know that, and I couldn't feel the anger, and that created a lot of physical and mental health issues, basically. So yeah, for KI, for me, was such a huge relief and a big step to start to integrate all that unconscious thing that I didn't know about.
Thank you. Because I want to come back to you about KI in a second and what happened for you. But so I'll go to everyone else and ask the same question, which is, and let me clarify for the audience, it's not like we only find buried anger or hurt. It's like we find a variety of things: shame, guilt, anger, it's all a lot of fear. But there's a dominant repression that if we can focus on it, it's usually what we bypassed on the spiritual path, as I say. So I'd like Toshi to answer. I already know what your repression was, but if you'll let everybody else know, and then anything else you want to add, just to, like Serena did, to help people understand how you got here then and what you had to find to get here, not what happened after you got here yet.
Yes, I repress anger as a dominant emotion. And yes, I mean, yeah, like what Serena was saying, it's like, when you ask me, are you an angry person? I was not an angry guy. I just didn't know that, just it wasn't part of my vocabulary or anything. I'm just this nice guy that, always like, caring about the people, like, and I just get upset. I would start crying. Like when I should be angry, I would just get upset. I didn't know why. And I used to ask myself, why am I crying when I should be standing up myself? I just couldn't. I just get, I just freeze up and start crying or something. I just like, it's about other people. It's okay. Don't worry about me and all of that stuff. So, and I came, I won't get into but I'll speak about how I found out it was anger is basically through inquiry. Because, when I came to KI, we were still working on a lot of stories and identities and stuff like that. But every suffering, meaning shame or fear or stories, I'm not good enough, all those identities led to the anger. Everything I looked at always led to the anger. That's how, if you would have told me, Toshi, you repress anger, I was like, no, I'm not a hungry person, I can't feel it. But if I really start to look, but even back then, just reversing things, it always led to anger. That's how I know, oh my God, even this is the fear of the anger. So everything was running from what we call frozen fear, the fear of the anger. So that's how I found out about it. So, yeah.
Okay, there's more to say. I know after you got to K, I'll come back to you. Is that all you wanted to say, Toshi, on that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So Jen, I'll come to you next. And just like Toshi, not only tell us what your repression is, but how you got here and how that connects to some of the insights you were sharing about nervous system regulation, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, oh, wow. My journey, I was that shy person that hid in the background. I was so ashamed of myself that I would avoid people. I would avoid crowds. I'd stay in the background. I was ashamed of myself to the core. And I was afraid, extremely afraid. This all wasn't conscious. But if you looked at my behavior, you'd be like, yeah, she's shy, she's got something going on. She doesn't feel good about herself. Or, other people might actually not have noticed that, but it's definitely how I felt inside. I was ashamed of my life choices. I was hiding in my life. I was afraid to show up. I was extremely shy and embarrassed a lot of times. And then also I was in a relationship in my marriage. I was extremely angry all the time. I was fueled by anger. I was resentful of my partner. He's not showing up. He's not doing his part. I'm so pissed off at him. I was just all the time, I was just fueled with anger. Like, how can he be this way? But I didn't do anything about it. I just stayed in the relationship. So I had those two things going on really strongly in my life before I found KI. I was extremely self-conscious and I was fucking pissed. So when I found KI and I found the tools, I discovered that it wasn't in my family of origin. It wasn't safe for me to show my vulnerability and to show my weakness and I was always amazed with people, like my last partner. He would be so vulnerable and just share people like what's going on with him, his health problems, this and that. I'm like, you're telling a client that? Like, why would you say that? Like, I would never say that in a million years. And I realized in hindsight, it was because I felt like if I shared my vulnerability or my sadness or my hurt, which is what I repress, as well as my shame. The shame was repressed too, and the fear. That's really, that brought me to this work. Those realizations brought me to this work, and these tools helped free me from these patterns that I wasn't even aware of, really not consciously aware of until I found these tools. So
Jen is like a rare occasion on Scott Kilby social media because her dominant is hurt and sadness, the vulnerable emotions. And you can see how much anger repression is here just on the panel. And I talk about that, a lot of it. But there's, it's good to hear from Jen, to hear from that perspective on this, because it doesn't matter what your repression is, we're still drawn to regulate the system and manage the suffering. Okay, so Natalia, I think the last one left on this is, what's your dominant, and what did you discover, anything at all about what was going on for you in the search before you got here?
Before I got here, okay. So I mean, my dominant is anger, like Serena and Toshi, but I actually remember I had an outburst of anger when I was a child, from time to time, but it was like I just couldn't stand it, and it was like I was like out of my mind. It was just like very explosive, yeah, like this. And so anger is my dominant, like my power, actually, to be honest, my power. So it was like I was just my all. Just because I couldn't stay within myself, being with another human being. So I was just like my attention was just going outwards. So I couldn't feel this. But your question, what, could you please repeat? I don't remember.
Yeah. Well, I have another question before I repeat it, which is, when you say you had outbursts when you were a kid, but then you say that anger is your dominant repression as an adult. Can you clarify that? Because some people might say, well, if she could get angry as a kid, why is she saying that's her repression now?
Yeah, I know. And I was, but at the same time, it's like, at the same time, it was like, if you asked me if I hate anyone, I would be like, no, I swear, no, I don't hate anyone. No, that's not me.
Is it that later on that you were more conditioned to stuff that down? Is that what it is? And then, because I think that's the question that comes up for me is,
I mean, for me, as I see it for now, it's like it was just too much of energy for my system, and it was one of the ways that I could just like this too much, just let it out.
Yeah.
But it was like completely out of control. It was like system error. It was just an explosion, and that's it.
Yeah. So that became a repression at some point, and then you discovered that when you got here at KI, that anger was a big part of it.
Yes, but yes, and because I learned how to behave to get what I needed, right? So that was like, anger wasn't the way. So I learned how to show what I had to show and not show what wasn't working with people, right? So I lost the track. Sorry.
That's okay. I think I understand. It's like you learned, like a lot of us, to be good or to show up a certain way is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And the anger was under it, and you discovered that here. I think that's clear. Is there anything else you want to say about just discovering that it was buried anger? Because I know you've worked with that since you've been here, and it's been the missing piece for you. Is there anything else you want to say about it before we get to your actual work in KI?
Yeah, because it was similar, like Serena said also, that I was like, at first I was like, because I couldn't even feel into my body when I was learning KI, like I couldn't even feel whether my body is saying anything. Like I couldn't feel anything. So it took me a long time to really actually learn to listen to my body. So to feel it, to not, I was so disconnected. So and I was fighting that it's not anger. I was really fighting that. No, it's not. Definitely, I'm not an anger repressor at first. I think, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm answering your question.
Yeah, you are. Can everybody here that's listening how much resistance there was in everybody to discovering the repression? Because I think that explains a lot when people are listening to me or us. You can't feel these emotions. And these are people who've been on a spiritual path for many years and didn't know they had these emotions. That's why I wanted to pull this together today, so that people could see what happens in a whole life when you have buried emotions and you're on a spiritual path. So now I'm gonna ask you guys a question that I didn't prep you on, but I think you'll be able to answer it. Because once you started to do KI, I imagine that there were things like identity, because you guys have alluded to it, like beliefs and identities that you've had since childhood, and alluded to how those are connected to the buried anger or hurt. Can each of you say a little bit more? Because so much of spirituality focuses on who am I? See that? And then we've got these identities that are right there. We feel them in our bodies and they're old. Can you just answer in your own words? Because you guys know how I would answer it. I do it all the time. But how do those relate to you? What did you discover in KI about where those identities come from, and how did you discover that? Start with Natalia. You okay to answer that first? Since you
Yes. I just want to even, say that I want to be first because actually I remember now that when I started training with you, I remember so much that I like the thing I was able to notice was the huge letter I at first. It was like the only thing that was actually showing up. It was like this I everywhere, and it was like, and at first I thought that this is like, I mean, I'm so, how to say this, I'm so advanced or something, I don't have any other stuff underneath this eye, huge eye. So but then but tools started to get sharper and more direct even. So, and then I just started to uncover all the reservoirs of basically rage and fear of rage underneath this, and all different identities underneath this I. But I was so programmed into this.
Yeah. Can I ask you about that when you said, because I remember talking to you about that, where you would say there's a strong I in my, I think we were even talking about how it's in the body, there's an I, but you said that you found some identities under that. What is that what you're referring to, the old childhood stuff, or can you say more about that? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, but it wasn't, it took me a while to even see that, see even this, to uncover even this, that like, then I just uncovered by boomerang, like I'm worse. That was like my main thing. And then it was just, it took some trust to KI actually to stay with it, because at first I saw this everywhere. It was like everything was just, I could see only this. I'm just worse everywhere with everyone and like all the time. Yeah.
And so people who are listening, you might not know the context of that, but I'm worse is like in that category of identities that anger repressors have. Is like, well, it's about good and bad often. And I guess you mean that there's some core identity that held the anger down. I'm worse. Is that how you would say it?
Yes. That was I needed to believe that I'm worse to stay safe from my anger.
Yeah. Right. Thank you so much. I think that was clear. So Toshi, can you tell us, because I know you have a lot to say about this, because we talk about it all the time, is that what I'm trying to frame as a question here is, we go to spirituality, or at least the teachers tell us that we're there to discover who I am, or, but then we get to KI and we see there's more involved in it. I just want, in your own words, what did you discover about identity once you started working with your buried anger?
Yeah, so I've looked for who I am all my life, even before spirituality, like just the general question I had. And to find out what the teacher said, there is nobody here. There's nobody here. It was so attractive for my system who just couldn't be here. Although it was looking for an identity or looking for something of who I am, but to be told that no, it was actually, and you can check, all the techniques to check, and they go, oh wow. And I had the experience, there's nobody here, there's nothing here. And how attractive and how juicy that is for the conditioning that I have to get away from this thing that is Toshi, includes anger, basically. And that was, and I wasn't conscious about this, and I started doing the work. But in hindsight, I really get to see how I had to use the non-identity as an identity, almost like not being here is an identity. It's like, yeah, there's nobody here. That became the identity. I was so blind to that. But the more I find out about that, I really got to see that it's not the identity that I believed in. I had to believe in identity so that I don't have to feel something. That's the biggest thing. Like, wow. So I'm actually addicted to believing that I'm not good enough, or he did this to me and this has happened to me, all this big identity. And that just feels so real. And it feels like Toshi. And that's like a separate self, or whatever you want to call it. And to me, there's nobody here. And you're not, none of this. Like, yeah, I can just let go. It doesn't work that way, because the only way to get to know that is what's unconscious. Because consciously, maybe I might see those thoughts that come up, but unconsciously, there's programs that tells me to believe those things, that fear to grab those things so I don't have to feel something. That's what was unconscious. When I start to see that, like, wow. And that's what I meant by everything I looked at in my life I was triggered about always led to the fear of the anger, fear of myself, fear of the power, fear of being myself, basically. And that was all in my body. So I had to almost cut off my body. And that's how I lived like that. So I just, that's how I speak about that really, about identity. And how I saw not having identity is such a identity, it's such a, like, we all have spiritual, just like but we kind of give it a license almost, because I'm on awareness. But that's so identity, because we can, from the repression's point of view, we can only grasp it and make it into something or put it in our pockets. So when I do feel bad, I can just tell myself I'm awareness, become this identity that there's nobody here. But it was so hard to spot that when you're suffering, when you're seeking safety, because it gave me that soothing safety. Oh man, I'm just awareness. It just feels so good. But then the suffering comes even stronger after that. I repeated that for like a year because I could not listen to my body, basically. So, but yeah.
I was talking to somebody the other day. I'll stay with you, Toshi, for a second, because she was saying that she could tell that her body was producing those identities, like you say, to keep her safe from the buried stuff. And she saw for the first time that she could witness that identity. And I said, well, that's what a lot of us do in awakening, is that we sit there and witness these identities, which is fine, but now you can see how your system is creating them. And she saw the difference between like just going down an awareness path where you sit and witness and allow endlessly, perhaps, who knows how long, and you get to the buried emotions that produce it and make that conscious. And I just wanted to do anything about that, bring anything up for you, that story in terms of the switch for you, because I think you were watching identity for a long time, weren't you? Yeah.
And to me, I was just addicted to believing thoughts and identity, really. And that could be, it was thoughts and spirituality, identity for me, myself, or for someone else, it could be a glass of wine. It's just how we cope. It's how and then if I saw that that's not right, I'll move on to something else. So, so it's, I'll find a new identity, or even find something else that is safe and that's suitable for my conditioning, really. So it's just about jumping around onto different things and how I keep myself suffering in that way. So but then everything's up for sale in some ways. Everything that comes in, you don't have to be specific. We all have resources. We all have a coping mechanism. We just need to look at that and mine with spirituality. That doesn't mean spirituality is bad or non-duality is not true or anything like that. I just couldn't meet it for what it is because I had to use it to bury my emotion. But I'm getting a bit far, but I really get to experience non-duality now because I don't have to use it for something, right? But I'll say that. I stop there for now. But,
that was definitely clear. Thank you. That was good. So Jen, let me come to you in your own way. We're just talking about the question of identity and maybe even what discovering buried emotions did for you in terms of seeing that. Because even though you had a yoga practice, didn't you deal with, like, in your path, who am I questions, things like that? And how did that change for you here, the identity?
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit different here. I didn't really contemplate my navel that much and that question, who am I? I really was more concerned with mindfulness practices and like being in the moment and being here now, and kind of more of like the tool that we use in Kilby, like mind-body mirroring and those kind of practices were more my concern. Because I tend to be already too much in my head, so I kind of avoided those practices. Except for Vipassana and watching my breath and the sensations in my body. But still, even those practices didn't bring to awareness these identities that I later discovered with KI, which are like the belief that like I'm not worthy of love. And then I do feel like I'm a piece of shit, You know, those were actually, those identities were actually buried and they were running in the background. And that's what I was telling myself throughout my day, but it was unconscious. And so just even bringing those identities through different tools like the boomerang tool is really useful because we know that's safer. And, you know, once we do KI, we realize, yeah, it's even though that identity or that belief is buried, it's safer than feeling the emotion that's keeping that identity in place, which for me is shame, anger, I mean, not anger, but sadness, hurt, and fear. So all those emotions that are buried, keeping these identities in place are, yeah, just having that realization that I've been walking around my entire life with these identities in place that I wasn't even conscious of, that I was bypassing with these mindfulness practices. Like, oh, I'm here now. I am the breath. You know, I am walking. Those kind of practices, which are, you know, in hindsight, they're really useful because it is the ground of awareness is where this work has to happen, because if we're not in our body and we're not aware, we can't even be aware of the identities and the deficiency stories if we're not embodied. So I do think, like, as a whole, like, I don't think that you need to come to this modality with a non-dual practice, but I do think it helps. And I do think, like, using these tools and getting and being farther along on the path in KI, like, wow. And I think we're going to talk about that because, like, to be on the path and to have this embodied awareness with the awareness of all these identities that were safer than what was buried, and have all that stuff online where I'm not holding this trauma suit in place all day through bypassing, it's like so liberating. So yeah, I mean, that's what I wanted to share. It's just like, I wasn't even aware of the identities that I believed about myself until coming to this path, or it was really buried. I hadn't made it conscious, you know, and those come usually from childhood, you know, the stories that we tell ourselves in childhood, because it's safer to tell ourselves these identities because that's how we get love and safety from our caregivers, is by telling ourselves these stories about ourselves, like, I'm not worthy of love, or I'm a piece of shit, or whatever it is for you. And we all have them. And a lot of people don't realize that, but almost everyone on the planet has a deficiency story. And a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people think, I'm the only one who has this identity, or it could even be an identity of I'm better than everyone else. You know, it can be lots of different identities. So yeah, I hope I explained myself clearly enough.
You did. And I would say whatever helps us survive, as I keep listening to you guys, it's like it doesn't even really matter. Even Toshi said that whatever identity comes up to help us stay safe from feeling something. Okay, so Serena, I think you're left here. Same question. We're just talking about how the way that you saw identity changed once you realized you had buried anger, as opposed to how you were looking at it before.
Yeah, so I think my main identity creation was coming from the trauma response that I already shared. What was running throughout my childhood: believe everything is fine, forget what happened, don't feel the anger, don't show the fear. So that was the main mechanism that was running in my system. And so that's what I continued recreating with Advaita practices, that identity. That's the story of my life, creating that identity to keep myself safe from feeling and expressing my anger and my power. And I remember that even with Advaita, I didn't use the question for recognition. I didn't use the question, who am I? Because it didn't work for me. I used, I think it was something like, who is the perceiver of the perceiver? So it helped me to have the felt sense in the body, and then through moment to moment awareness, I was bringing it more into my experience, something like this. But that practice itself was creating the same identity through the same trauma response. Just be neutral, don't feel anything, just feel the lightness. And it was actually acting out the same trauma response through the non-dual practice, basically, and through the recognition. Just be the lightness, feel the lightness, don't feel anger, don't feel the pain, but it was all unconscious. So that identity was running through the recognition, basically. And yeah, I couldn't see any, it was just all unconscious. I started to see it with KI after I started to make the unconscious conscious, basically. Did I respond to the question?
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you. Okay, so I've got a next question. For some reason, this is where I want to go with it, because I think a lot of people don't understand, because they haven't done the work yet, how everyday suffering or suffering in their life is connected to buried emotions in the body. So this is like an open-ended question. What could you say to people out there who they don't have the consciousness yet to see that their depression comes from buried emotions, or their anxiety comes from buried anger, or their addiction is how they stuff that down, or the chronic pain is how that's showing up right now? They don't have that consciousness. So what would you say to them to help them get over that little threshold where people can understand it? By sharing about your experience, can each of you share about how things, maybe you were even surprised to learn how certain things were connected to the buried emotions? Can you close that gap for people after you've done KI and help them understand how you understand your experience more in terms of, am I making sense about the question? Of like, because I can say things now after doing this work that I could never say 10 years ago about where my suffering was coming from. Can you help people understand? Help that question's clear. Toshi, I'll start with you if I made the question clear.
I think so. Because you mentioned about how would I explain to people, because we all have different triggers, we all have different paths that we've walked on, whether you're spiritual or not spiritual, or you just have a conditioning or depression or whatever it is. But to me, what I really saw was the fact that the triggers or the suffering, what we call suffering, is whenever I'm unconscious, or when I don't know what I'm telling myself unconsciously. So if I get anxiety, if I could only just be anxious and just be done with it and feel that fully, I've seen it in, this becomes a bit non-joke, but it can't really stay if you can actually feel it and then see the thoughts attached to it. But I could not do that because I was trying to sit with it without seeing the thoughts or without feeling the past. I just, there was no mind and body connection there. And that's what we get to do. And at the surface level, I think it's easier to connect the mind and body. Maybe we have few kind of tools to do that. But to get to the buried emotion, it was really, really difficult for me. That's how buried it was. So for me, what really kind of surprised me was the fact that it doesn't matter what it is, but it's about what I'm unconscious of, what I'm telling myself in any given moment. If I'm scared, if I'm telling myself not to be scared, it's not the fact that I'm scared I'm suffering. It's that I'm unconscious the fact that you shouldn't be scared. I should not be scared, or I should not be this because I might have to be angry. And that was the suffering for me. That's why I didn't see. There was anger down there. It's all the same things, like how unconscious we are. We're not saying that if you do KI, you're going to be this certain person or you're going to change this behavior. It's not about changing behavior. That's when I really clearly saw it's not about changing behavior or personality or not liking this or not. It's, can I actually meet that consciously? No, I couldn't, because I was telling all these things unconsciously so that I don't have to be angry. So I had to always be nice. So that's what really changed me. And that, if you can just grasp this, you can really start to see, you can navigate yourself easier, because you see how, I always talk about this. Like when I sit down to do the work, it's the guy who sits down to do the work has to be put on the chopping block. It's almost Toshi that who I'm up against. And I have many cunning ways to take you out of this work by throwing different things. But if I know that fact that it's not about what I'm looking at or the content of what I'm looking at, it's about what I'm unconscious about. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but that's how, if you can grasp that about this work, then I think it can really change a lot of things for me. Then everything's the same. Everything's up for sale to me,
Yeah.
So you don't have to, because mind wants to make it into focus on certain things to make it, because some things will feel so much true than other things. And I love to talk about this. So this has happened to me. So, he did this to me, or I did this. And those wounds and the pain, we're holding on to it, the power of the identity. When you start to see that, there's different energies that wants to protect this and keeps going. And if I don't see that, I don't know what I'm up against. And you just can't think your way out. So I don't know if I'm being clear. So you have to have the mind-body connection, meaning, where is it? Where is the charge in the body? What thoughts attached to that, and what feelings and images and all that stuff. At any given moment, that's all there is. And he starts to see that. So yeah, that's why I say that for now. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So let me ask the question again. I'll go to you, Jen. I'll see if I can ask it even better, more clearly. When we first start KI, we don't know where our suffering comes from quite often. That's what everybody has shared, like not knowing where it comes from, in a way, like not knowing about the repressed emotions. So what have you learned or discovered since then about where that suffering was coming from that you were regulating all the time? That's maybe a different way to ask it. What have you learned and discovered about that?
Well, for me, I mean, I think that's the tricky part with this work, is that it wasn't until I actually did the work that I realized that my buried emotions were actually feeding all the forms of my suffering. So I wasn't able to make that connection until I actually did the work. So I don't know if you had told me the context before and said, oh, this is the cause of all your forms of suffering, like your toxic relationship patterns, the tension in your jaw, your insomnia, all these issues, your compulsions to be busy. If you had told me that my repressed hurt, sadness, and fear was the cause of all that, and if I was able to make that connection, I mean, maybe somehow intuitively that sort of makes sense. Like, yeah, there's something buried in my body. I'm feeling contractions and it's feeling kind of icky. And that acknowledging these buried emotions is going to help these symptoms that I have of suffering. I don't know if I could have made that connection, but after doing the work, it's like so obvious. Like, as soon as I do the work, it's like, oh, all these things in my life that were causing my suffering have just naturally gone away, dissolved, transmuted. And my life is like 180 degrees. So, but I think because it's a mental construction, until we actually do the work to know that suffering is caused from the buried emotions, because it's happening up here, I don't know that I would have actually ever been able to make that connection until actually like doing the work, because it is experiential. So that's why it's so important to do the work, because you can't learn it from watching videos. You can't learn it from people explaining it to you. You actually have to do the processing to actually feel the benefits. So I know I didn't answer your question, because I don't know how I would have made that connection without doing the work, actually, and seeing the fruits of doing it. So
Yeah, I think that you did answer it, because I think the people, when they first start, they can't, just like you say. That's why I'm bringing it up, because I think you guys can share something that you've seen that people can't see when they first start. So I was just asking about your own experience, and I think you shared it, that you saw the connections. It was obvious after you did it. So Natalia, that's the same question, is how has KI helped you discover more of the source of their suffering, like the source of I'm worse and all that?
I want to first say something that at first when I heard about you, I checked your website and I was like repulsed. And it took me several months more to suffer more. And then I was ready, and then I came back and I was like, yes, this is 100%. I don't know, something was ready. So I would say just suffer more, okay? And then do the test, like repression test, and check. So,
Did you see the connection between the buried anger and different forms of suffering?
I mean, I didn't at first.
Right. But you did after doing the work. Can you share anything about that, about that discovery? So if people don't have that experience, I'm trying to get you guys to share.
So like I said already, it took me some time to even like using inquiries, to even just recognize if my body is reacting or not. Like to even this took some time. So I was just keep trying. And then when I was oh my God, okay, I can feel it. I can feel some answer. I can feel like my tension around my hips is getting stronger, or around my solar plexus. There's like there is just this like movement, and I can sense it, or just this feeling in my belly, and like many different areas, like the tension in my jaw. Actually, at first was like that was like one of my main areas. So each time when I was just bringing the identity and reversing it, and I mean, because I was learning like right now, this is so direct. It wasn't that direct when I started, so it took me even more time. But actually, I could just feel there is just, it's answering. My body's answering. It's just saying yeah, but it was just this weird feeling of it's not matching here and here. It's just like it's saying something else. So that was really weird at first, but I somehow trusted the process, and I was just keep going, and then it was just like I was just starting, but after some time, I don't remember even how long it took me to really feel the anger, but then I started to open, and that was that was huge. Yeah.
Thank you. Serena, can you answer that? Whether you came to see the connection between the suffering that was at the surface and anger by doing KI, or other emotions are buried?
Yeah. And what I could suggest to people who are listening to this and who are beginners and can't make the body-mind connection yet, or they don't really understand the mechanics of emotional repression, I would suggest, in a moment I will explain why, I suggest to be aware of the discomfort during the day, like how you react in certain situations, how you react when you get triggered or you feel mistreated. Be aware of the discomfort that you feel with people at work, in your relationship, when you don't know how to react, when you get anxious. These are all signs, or when you start to talk about someone with someone else to avoid the conflict, like all these signs of the discomfort, frustration, and anxiety, avoidance, like start to be aware of your behavior and reactions during the day. But especially the word discomfort is coming up in my mind, because that's what I was aware of back then. I couldn't link anything. I had no awareness on anger in my body. I was aware only of the discomfort. And now we are talking about spiritual practice and how we came to KI, because we failed with spiritual practice after a while. So just imagine, my experience was that I was organizing retreats, like Satsang retreats, 1 week, 2 week retreats. And literally I was sitting in Satsang without any suffering, the all pervasive experience of oneness and no suffering. And then I went out of the Satsang hall. Someone took my chair during dinner with the energy of like, I have the right to do this. And immediately, anxiety, discomfort, and the deficient feeling of I'm not important at all. I'm weak and I'm small. And I felt the frustration and the discomfort. But the frustration and the discomfort wasn't because of the person who did that. It was because I couldn't feel and express the anger, but I had zero clue about that. So that's why I say just be aware of the frustration and the discomfort during the day and your reactions. Even if you don't know which emotions you repress, if you repress, just start to be aware of it, start to be aware of that, and just keep it in mind that probably, or it's most likely because of unfelt, unconscious emotions in the body that's been buried, just as it was for me. From emptiness to trigger, you know, that was a big one for me.
Thank you. Okay, so this is all good because this leads me to my next question, which this will also be challenging for the audience a little bit, maybe a lot. It's already challenging if you have buried emotions to see, as everybody said, or some people have alluded to, it's really hard to see until you do the work, how the buried emotions produce different responses, although you guys have been good at explaining it. Okay, so something happens here that we call ownership. And the best way to open this topic to me is to talk about victim consciousness, because we all have some version of that. And to me, it's really broad. It's just like Serena said, I'm small, different versions of these deficiency stories and victim consciousness. One of the good things that I discovered here for myself, and you guys maybe too, is when you're doing the spiritual path without knowing about the buried emotions, you can't take ownership of how you create them, how they're created. And so then you're kind of stuck in this victim consciousness, or like things are happening to me. And I'll even add that with the awareness teachings, it can reinforce that things are just happening to me, but then me is the awareness. and it's not very empowering until you find that there really is conditioning in our body that demands that we suffer, that it demands that we be depressed and anxious and have pain, and that's just really buried, that those mind-body conditioning is buried. So my question is, in what way, if you understand the question, in what way did ownership or being able to find that help you on your path, given that before we were disempowered often because we didn't understand where it was all coming from, the victim consciousness and other things? Can you speak to that ownership that we talk about in like third phase more than anything? Serena, you want to start?
So basically, victim consciousness or falling into victimhood is a response. And we can't just change that by seeing that. I couldn't change that just by seeing that. But after starting to do KI, I saw more and more this mechanism of, like, the victim consciousness was basically a reaction to not being able to express my anger. And if I wasn't okay with something, you know, like, these things are just normal for some people, but for me, because of the childhood conditioning, it was impossible to express anger, power, or set a boundary, different things. So what I had was only to fall into victimhood, being small, and that's how I protected myself from further abuse as a child, because I couldn't access my power and go away, you know. So all what I had was victim consciousness. So when I started to see it, I want to be honest, I hated it, and I wanted to get rid of it, and I deeply judged it. And then after I understood, I don't know what happened, something just shifted in my practice, and I started to feel a very deep compassion and love with it, because I understood deeply that I had no other chance as a child to survive. So that was the first step to not, so it just automatically shifted from self-hatred and judgment to compassion and self-love. And I think it's the basics if someone wants to work with these deeply buried and traumatic stuff, to kind of have that experience with yourself that you don't judge these things. That's a very good first step. That was for me. And after I had more space with it, with this mechanism, I started to use those different inquiries that we have. And I started to see the utility of this victim consciousness and smallness, you know, like, I have to be a victim. I have to be small so then they don't hurt me. You see the movement? So that was buried in my body. I wasn't aware of it. It was more like my personality is like this phoning response, being the victim, and I have to be the victim so they don't hurt me. So that's what I did as a child for safety. So with the different repression tools that we have, I started to bring it more and more into my awareness. Like, I have to be a victim, I have to be small to stay safe so they don't see me, they don't hurt me. That's just a so innocent mechanism, I guess, from that position now I can see after the judgment phase. What I want to say is that from this disempowered, victimy place, I started to feel that I could express myself more and more. The fear was still coming up, but this owning the experience came up. Because of the victimhood, I didn't feel like I was owning my experience, but the repression work gave me this through the work itself, that I could make it conscious, I could bring it up, I could kind of process these stuck energies, and I started to feel like I'm owning this energy, I'm owning my victimhood, I'm owning my smallness that I've been doing for safety. And through that deep energetic work that KI gave me, I started to feel, I'm not gonna cry, more and more self-love and power within myself and connection, something like this. But it was very visceral, very human. So what I couldn't do with the spiritual practices and with Advaita inquiry was this deep human integration. I kind of had a spacious feeling of that through the spiritual practices, the connection, interconnectedness and love, but this deep human integration, this visceral feeling that it's here in me, in my body, that was a missing piece. So I had to go into the victimhood, into the trauma or whatever was buried in the body and process that to actually bring it into my body. So that's how I keep transforming the pain into presence and love in the body.
Thank you, Serena. So I'm going to go to you, Jen. And the question is, I mean, Serena just covered victim consciousness really well in terms of ownership, but you can talk about that too. Is there any other areas? I'll give you an example. It's like if I work with someone with chronic fatigue, that can feel like it's just happening to you, you know? It doesn't seem like when people come here that they have conditioning, they don't know about that conditioning that says, I have to be fatigued because I have to hold the anger back. It's how I hold the anger back. So can you talk about ownership in your own life and how it changed that by discovering how your body had conditioning that would be creating, like she said, victim consciousness, but it creates a lot of different things and we don't, until we're conscious of it, we don't really know. Is there anything you can say about ownership for people who don't know about that yet?
Well, I don't know that I can really add anything to what Serena was speaking to. Basically, it's the utility inquiry that works for me to realize that I had to bury my sadness, my hurt, my shame, my fear as a child to stay safe and to get love from my family of origin. And just making that conscious, using the tools, it gave me a lot of self-compassion, and it also empowered me to realize like I wasn't a victim. Well, if I look back as a child, like I realized that I have compassion for the fact that I had no choice at the time. That's what I had to do at the time. And that's empowering to know like I had to bury all that stuff to stay safe, and making that conscious and taking that ownership over, like I had no choice. That's what I had to do. That is, I guess, could be considered like I was a victim because I had no choice, but then at the same time, somehow just making that conscious, I feel more empowered in knowing that I had no choice, but I have a choice now. So I think just knowing that, making that conscious that I had no choice then, it's empowering now, but also knowing that I have a choice now to make it conscious that I buried all that and that I don't have to bury it anymore. So like, I don't have to bury that sadness, that hurt, and that fear anymore, but I had to then. And so, yeah. So, yeah, making that conscious and having compassion for myself, taking ownership over that, and is very liberating. So yeah, I don't know that I can say that I wasn't a victim as a child, because at the end of the day, I think we are all victims of whatever environment we grow up in, but making it conscious that we had no choice, but we have a choice now, somehow is liberating, if that makes sense. I never really actually took time to really think this through. So it's kind of interesting to think that, like, yeah, now I feel like I'm not a victim. I don't have to be a victim now. I can take ownership of my story now.
Thank you, Jen. And so, Toshi, I'll ask you now, same question. Now that you guys are sharing, it just reminds me to ask the question differently. Like when I was a kid, I stored anger and developed chronic pain, and that's how I dealt with all that victim consciousness and that buried rage. But then when I come here to do this work, I get to see why I did that. I get to see that as an adult, I have to be in pain. I had to be in pain to protect myself. So there's ownership. And here's what I mean in practice and experience, where we see that conditioning. Instead of just being the victim of that pain or whatever that is, we can make that conscious, as Jen says. Anything else you want to add on that, Toshi?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about this for a long time, but yeah, I mean, yeah, there's so much about Jen and Serena shared. Plus, I would say for me, the ownership is about taking responsibility of my suffering, basically. And that's, if I couldn't do that, how can I do that when I'm not conscious of what's happening inside of me, right? Of course, I want to take responsibility and take ownership, but I can't because I'm not conscious. Everything's buried. That's why I couldn't. So, and since we're talking about spiritualities here, and I want to just talk about how I came through my here, meaning I've already had a condition in that world was done to me, whether world is doing this to me. So this is happening to me, and that was reinforced by certain non-dual techniques of spirituality. Like neti things. I'm not this, I'm not that, and just like allowing things to be here, and I'm not this, I'm not that. Father put me into this place where everything just rising, I'm just not part of it, and just like it's such a safe place, runaway place. I could just hide there all my life, right? But then my pain kept going, and I couldn't access it, and that was the frustration until I start doing KI, that I could actually ask this contraction or poke this, or with the tools to get these thoughts down there, that because there was like what I call myth of non-duality, where what's arising is everything already or something. What's already arising is like who you are already. But no, more than half of the things about myself was not arising. And especially if I believed in something I couldn't see as false. So it was all of that was just making me confused. So how can I take responsibility of my suffering when I don't know more than half of the things that I'm choosing to do? Like I didn't have a choice, like exactly what Jen was saying. I had to do what the conditioning had to do. But I told myself that's what I like. I'm just a nice guy. That's my personality. I like these people. I don't like these people. But I didn't know I had no choice in that. I had to like these people and not like these people. I had to choose this way and not this way, because for the safety, so that I don't have to feel my anger or express them. So when I really start to see that, I can really start to own and how I manipulate the situation unconsciously or whatever it is to actually kind of keep this story going. And I want to talk about I guess we can talk about unmet needs, where I can set myself up. If I feel I'm unlovable, I make sure that I don't tell people that I want love. So that everything that reflects back to me, that I'm not lovable. So people won't tell me people won't know that I need love. So they don't necessarily tell me. That's one of the ways that we set up so that we can stay a victim. And that just reinforces the whole idea. And it's much safer if the world is done to me, if the world is doing this to me, I don't have to take responsibility. And therefore I don't have to be myself. Therefore therefore I don't have to be fully myself, because if I'm fully being myself and if I'm being fully authentic, I might have to be angry. And that's like, no way. Yes, I want to be authentic maybe on the surface, but no, not if I have to be angry. So it's about, so how can I be? So after doing KI for many years now, I can start, when I start to really own my stuff and start to really be authentic, because I get to actually see, to own and take responsibility of my feelings or who I am, which includes anger now, because it couldn't include anger before. Therefore, it was not authentic. It was just opposite of that. So that's the ownership stuff for me. So yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you, Toshi. Natalia, I'm not telling you what to share about, but when you were sharing about I'm worse, maybe you could say something about that in terms of ownership, because you said you found anger under it. But like, I don't know if a person listening could make that connection. Could you take us through that? Like how did you find that connection with some of these identities? Were you able to take ownership by saying, oh, my system produces these things?
Yes, yeah, I do. I want to say
Okay.
that I really needed to see how does it serve me, you know, how does it the believing that I'm something or I'm worse or I don't know, I'm not worth being loved or something. Like how does it serve me really? And what do I really get out of this? And that led me to, and I really saw how I'm using myself actually, how I'm using my body to get something, whatever, just acceptance, love, attention, stay safe. How I'm just using my body instead of listening to it and just being really like, yeah. I mean, this is so important for me.
Thank you.
And also how I needed to believe that I need to get this, whatever, just love. How I really need how I needed to believe that I need to get love. I mean, this is just so mind-blowing for me. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so here's my last question. Somebody asked me this question. I've been trying to answer it, but now I get a chance to ask you guys. Tell me the before and after repression inquiry. And that's a question that people ask because they don't know what to expect. And we've talked about it a little bit, but what would you say in your own words in terms of, well, I won't even say anything else. What's the before and after for emotional repression inquiry for you, Natalia? Words.
Oh my God, you should expect everything, the best and the worst during the path, actually meeting all of yourself. I mean, you should expect, I mean, what should you expect? I mean, it really takes a lot of patience towards myself and really, but it's just so unbelievably amazing to feel myself, to stay with myself, just to be present within my body and to just be with myself together and being with people. This is like the most incredible. Just I'm just starting to explore this. I mean, experience this actually. It's amazing. So like, and that everything, like just everything can be here. Like everything. It's just so it's like amazing circle back actually to non-dual pointings, but without believing in them, and because it's no longer a theory, because so yeah, so but it's just realizing, oh my God, you're like, yes, this is yes, this is like this is just like this, but through my own, like through this, I mean, I was really trying to do this, to make this, like to use the pointers and make them, like to force, like to do this. But I needed to, I'm just you know, I'm not like, oh my God, now I want to say like, it sounds like maybe I'm done or something, and this is like another thing here, but sorry, yeah, sorry, I just got
That was good.
triggered by
Yeah,
myself.
that was great. No, I love that because I'm just asking for before and after, and we've been talking about a spiritual path, so that they do want to hear about the non-dual part, I think.
Yeah, so all the teachers are saying, or most of it is true, but yeah, I needed to first go through all the, I want to say shit, but it's just, it's not, you know, really, it doesn't feel right now to say this, that this is shit, but like to meet myself, keep meeting myself deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and go everywhere where I really didn't want to go within myself, and feel it and see it and really stay with it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Serena, same question. Hope it's clear. If somebody asked you, what was it like before and after repression inquiry, what would you say?
I receive this question a lot during clarity calls when I meet new people. And I've been doing this work for 4 years, and I cannot compare the experience before and not after, but compared to the beginning. Like, how is my experience now? Because when I met you, I was in so much emotional and physical pain, excruciating pain because of the colitis and anxiety. Like, imagine I'm sure you can relate, Scott, excruciating pain for 3 years, not going away. And I ended up just wanting to die, basically. And I was basically planning how to kill myself because I couldn't bear the pain anymore, ongoing pain for months, years. You know the effect of that only if you go through that. Like, you just want to die at some point. And basically a lot of mental health issues, CPTSD, and I couldn't focus on anything anymore. Like, a lot of issues. It was really hard to just exist in this body and just think, or just to survive during the day. Everything was very difficult. I couldn't really speak normally. When I met you, I was like, even thinking or finding the words meant like a struggle for me. And now, as you can see, I can talk continuously without problem. So that's a big shift for me. And I still have physical pain sometimes as a part of the process, but now I also know what's happening in my body when I have a deeper release. I know that sometimes it comes with pain or with some sickness, and now I know how to use it, but I can't compare that pain to how it was 4 years ago. Like, it's almost nothing compared to that. And the anxiety is fluctuating, but it was ongoing on a 10 scale. It was like 100 all the time before KI, you know? And now it's like on a 10 scale, it's between 2 and 6. I don't know, it's fluctuating, you know? So that's also a big shift coming from complex trauma. And just to give some background, I do this work with a lot of trauma, meaning that the first 20 years of my life was domestic violence, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse. So that's my past. So that's where I'm coming from. So for me, these shifts are huge, you know, are huge. When I met you, when I started to do the work, I couldn't really meet people anymore because of the social anxiety. It was just too overwhelming for me. And now I have close friends living close to me. I enjoy spending time with them. That's also a huge shift for me. I couldn't find my path in life. I didn't know what I wanted to do work-wise, you know, and now it's just super clear. I just do what I love. I just do what I enjoy, KI, working with people, sharing these things, you know. So everything has shifted since then. And yeah. And the big shift is also that I'm not looking for the end of suffering anymore, in a way. Sometimes I'm still pissed off. Sometimes I still feel down, but it's very different experience than before KI. Now I can handle things and myself much better in a way, and I can be with myself with much more love and compassion, because 4 years ago I was so much dwelling in self-hatred and self-judgment because of my traumas. And with KI, actually through KI, I learned to that was also a huge shift to love myself, to have compassion with this body mind, with all the trauma in it, you know, and kind of using the work and using the tools through that openness and curiosity regarding my experience, basically, and the pain that's buried in the body. So that's a huge shift for me.
Thank you. And thank you for mentioning the severe trauma, because you do have to be patient with something like that. You really do. And you have been patient with. And so many people who want to rush to awakening don't understand that you have to be patient with your body with something like that. Thank you for saying that.
Yes, working with repression, like, it's a vulnerable stuff. those who want to start this work, we just have to be a little bit clear about that trauma will come up, but you also learn how to work with it, how to hold it, and how to deal with it. You don't have to process it. So that's a big difference. And the work is challenging in a way, and it was for me, and still sometimes it's challenging, but in a very different way, because now I feel safe with whatever is coming up in my experience and in my process, during the process.
Thank you. Jen, come to you next. The question is before and after KI.
Boy, it's like night and day. Before I did KI, I felt like I was a walking self-sabotage experience. I felt like I was consistently sabotaging myself. And I only realized that after I started doing KI. I felt like I was Sisyphus, like pushing that rock up the hill and watching it come down, and then pushing it up again and watching it come down over and over again. So yeah, I feel like finding KI was like a miracle in my life. So I suffered from toxic relationship patterns, codependency, insomnia, busyness. I had like constant tension in my jaw and my throat. I couldn't fully breathe into my rib cage. I was constantly holding my breath. I was hiding in my life. And kind of like in Ken Wilber's book, which I just recently read, called Post-Truth World, he talks about how we need to clean up to show up. And I feel like these tools helped me to clean up like my fragmented parts, my repressed parts, and my fragmented parts, my repressed parts. And in doing that, I feel like I can show up now. I feel like I don't have anything like pushing me, like I was pushing myself down basically by pushing my sadness, hurt, and fear down. I was pushing myself down, my life force, my vitality, in repressing these emotions. I was pushing down who I was by identifying with all that, basically, is what I discovered. And now by bringing that energy online that I was spending so much energy pushing down, like it takes a lot of energy to push down our anger, fear, sadness, hurt. I mean, it's a lot. We're like showing up in the world like this or like that, just trying to kind of manage how we're seen in the world. And that takes a lot of energy. So having that energy available to me now to like show up and be more authentic and all that is like, it's night and day. And also I feel like stuff comes up now for me in my life. And if I get triggered or something, it happens so much less now in my life because the energy in the body just isn't getting triggered as much anymore. I feel like I have the tools to work on it now, and there's just less and less like I can breathe fully in my rib cage now, whereas before I was just holding my breath constantly, like in fear throughout the day, and just to have that availability of the breath. Just so many different things. It's it's just been a powerful experience learning these tools and being able to use them day in, day out, which I do. And you know, I need them less and less actually, because I mean, that's the thing about these. We don't need to keep going back to these tools for nervous system regulation. Like once the energy was out of my body, the contractions in my jaw and my throat and my back and my rib cage, like it's gone. Like I don't need to keep coming back to these tools. I mean, I just go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper with them. So, and I still do my hatha yoga and my meditation, but it's not like I have to like regulate myself. I just do it because it's, I love it. I enjoy it, and it helps me be, yeah, just a better me, but I'm not doing it just to manage my life and because I'm compulsive about it like I was before. So
Thank you.
thanks.
Yeah. Toshi, same question before and after KI.
Yeah, when I started KI repression work, I felt like I was trying to heal myself, fix myself, get relief from myself, really. But as you really start to do the work and really get in touch with your anger and the fear of the anger, and you can start to express that in my life, it just becomes more about, I guess, what Natalia was saying about more about meeting myself, the unconscious part, the part that I had to not love or not like about myself that I have to look at because they're all down there, and that's the real difference that I'm experiencing now. Where yes, it felt like I came to fix myself and heal myself, but if you see why I had to do that, and when those conditioning starts to fall away, it's just nothing but meeting myself more and more where I'm uncomfortable to meet or what I don't like about myself. It will just keep showing up in life, and that's why it feels like I'm behind that suffering. There's always something to go deeper. So it feels like it's like a more like ever deepening work about myself and just seeing how simple everything is within, or how simple things are, because this was the conditioning, it was myself, this is conditioning and the mind that wanted to complicate things, and this happened to me, so this I have to do this and I have to speak in this way, all of that. But when you really start to see they're just a coping mechanism, and it's not about what those individual things that you can really start to see and simplify what's really happening in us, and I just became more available here and now. Before I was I had to go in the future or the past, all that stuff I had to do so that I don't have to be here, so that I can stay a victim of all of those things. So yeah, I can really, like, what Jane was saying, like, things I used to do to cope, to keep my nervous system okay and all of stuff. I can actually, if I still like to do them, I can really enjoy them. Like even people pleasing, like I can actually really be nice without wanting to get love. And that's amazing feeling to actually be available. But if I don't like it, I say, no, leave me alone. I couldn't say that. I couldn't draw that line. And there's no much business or the commentating, all that stuff that I had to do, or this body reaction. So there's no, so it's very subtle too. I could say, it feels like my world's gone upside down, but also nothing has really changed in some ways too. It was already, the responsibility was already there. If I could actually be conscious and see it, the love was already here, and the compassion, there's nobody actually have to be compassionate about. It was already here, and I get to see that more and more as I become conscious and allow to fully be myself, to turn up to life. I wasn't fully participating because it was too much. I might have to be angry, but now there's not even a thought about whether I should participate or not. I just can kind of turn up and just be authentic self, or whatever it is. But if I don't do that, the suffering will let me know, and I have that trust. So it's not like I have to grab something to know, okay, what am I doing? I used to do that too when I started care. What's wrong with me? Oh, there's something wrong with this here. I'm telling myself all these things. But then I wasn't really turning up to life. I was missing everything too, But now I can just, if I'm suffering, the body is going to let me know, life's going to let me know, and I have the tools to look. So I can really participate and live, And I don't have to avoid this uncomfortable feeling, because it was about feeling good all the time. And not feeling good is not good. But not feeling not good is part of it, and I can really kind of be that. And all those not feeling good part was that bit that I wasn't really meeting. All those Toshis that didn't feel good, I wasn't really meeting. And it feels like I have to be that part. But if there's no conditioning that says no, that's not good, or this is better, then I can actually, it just becomes another thing, sort of thing, rather than all these ideas and about certain feelings or certain situations. So yeah, so it's kind of it's real freedom in a way that it does, like, and since we're talking about spirituality, like one of the layers, it is, all the pointers, I'm speaking from it, I'm walking from it most of the time. It feels like that. I don't have to believe it, like one Natalia was saying. I don't have to validate that what I believe in, or those spiritual pointings and non-joke. They're just there. I don't have to advertise it. I don't have to give validation. Before I had to, but now I don't have to talk about it because it's the case. There's nothing, that energy, but I still love it. That's why I'm here talking about it too. And I get to fully enjoy that, fully enjoy all the non-dual stuff, because I love it. And it's the truth in my experience. But I can actually need it and be here with it. I don't have to grab it and keep it in my pocket for rainy days. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Toshi. And thank you to everybody. That's the last of my questions. But if you like this, please comment, below and ask us questions that we didn't answer, or let us know if you want to see more content like this. You'll see many of these people on my website. If you go to kilby.com, if you want to work with some of them, check them out. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.